Sure, gang. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Garba Sithole, and I'm a student from the University of Witwatersrand studying Bachelor of Accounting Science. So in today's video, we are going to be doing content on economic growth. So the video is also going to be very short because I'm summarizing what you guys need to know on economic growth. In my previous video, I did define what economic growth is, and I said it is an increase in the real GDP of a country, or it can also be defined as the expansion of your PPF, right? So in today's video, we are going in depth with economic growth. So any growth rate that you need to calculate, you need to say new minus old over old times 100. So if you're calculating economic growth, you're going to say the new real GDP less the old real GDP over the old real GDP. I hope that's clear. So it's going to be, okay, let me just put a bullet point that you're looking at real GDP. And then we go on to the second point. So we have what we call the rule of 70. So whenever you want to know how long it takes for an interest rate to double, right, you use what we call the rule of 70. So the rule says 70 over the percentage rate or the percentage growth rate, right? So just be mindful of that. And then I want to look at markets, right? More specifically, the labor markets. But before I do that, I want to look at the production function and what it is. So this is how a production function looks like. It is very different from the production possibility curve, which looked something like this, right? This one is looking like the opposite way. So what is it? If you check on your x-axis, you have labor. On your y-axis, you have real GDP. Therefore, it means that this is a curve that shows you how real GDP changes as the quantity of labor changes. What is it? It is a function that tells you how real GDP changes, how it changes over time, how it increases as your labor also changes, as the quantity of labor also changes. So let us go to the second part of what I wanted to discuss, right, which are labor markets. So before we go on, before you look at these graphs, I want to bring to your attention something. So remember when I did the circular flow model in one of my videos, I talk about households being the suppliers of the factors of production. So households provide the factors of production. And what are one of those factors? What is one of those factors of production? Labor, right? So labor is provided by households. So then what does that mean? It means that households are actually suppliers in the labor markets. We are so used to seeing households being the demanders of goods and services, right? It depends on what market you are, right? So if you are in the market of goods and services, obviously households are the ones who are demanding the goods, whereas firms are supplying the goods. But if you are looking at the labor market, it is the households that are supplying the labor and the firms that are demanding the labor. So I hope that is clear. So firms demand the labor. They demand the labor, right? So you, as any markets, you have the supply and the demand, and where they meet, you have the equilibrium quantity of labor and the equilibrium real wage. So we are comparing the real wage as well as how it changes when quantity of labor changes. So what you would have to do is to see, for example, if you have an outward shift of the demand curve, it means that you are going to have an increase in the real labor, in the real wages, as well as an increase in the equilibrium quantity of labor. So if you guys check where the supply and the demand are meeting, I also have a corresponding point on my production function. This is the production function. And at this point, we say that we have potential GDP. Reason being, when the supply of labor, when the people who are offering the labor are equal to the people that are demanding labor, it means that I have full employment. Whenever I have full employment, it means that I have potential GDP. What does potential GDP, just to remind you, mean? It means that you are using your resources to a maximum, right? You have natural unemployment, meaning that any other unemployment that is there is only because of frictional and structural unemployment. And when you have when the employment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment, then you have what we call full employment, which is shown here. So when the supply meets the demand, you have full employment. When you have full employment, you will have potential GDP. So let me just also note that down: full employment. And you have a corresponding point on the production function, and this will be called potential GDP. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do so. Make sure you click that subscribe button and you become part of our family. Okay, now let us look at what happens when there are changes in the supply curve, right? So I wanna say, whenever there's a change, whenever there's a shift in the supply curve, it will always, and always I say, cause a movement along my production function. So in the test, you need to, whenever you are given things that affect, or whenever you're given a sentence or a scenario, you need to ask yourself, does it affect supply or does it affect demand? And if it affects supply, ask yourself then, does it shift the supply outward, meaning that I have an increase, or does it shift it inward, meaning that I have a decrease? And based on that, you can then conclude that there's going to be a movement in your production function. For example, in this instance, there was a shift outward, right? There was an outward shift of supply, meaning that supply increased. So you're going to have a movement along the production function, and it's going to be an increase, right? An increase in real GDP along the production function. So what are the main, right, potential reasons for shifts in the supply curve? So you can have a change in the average hours per worker. For example, when you're talking about hours, we can talk about a scenario where the number of holidays have been decreased, meaning that people will have to work more because they have less holidays. So that means supply will shift to the right. Or if the number of holidays have been extended, that means supply will shift to the left, because people will need to work less because they have more holidays, right? And then you look at employment to population ratio, right? And then you look at the working age population. So those are the potential reasons for shifts, but they can give you any reason. What you need to ask yourself is, does this affect supply or does it affect demand, right? And remember, who are the suppliers of labor? Households. So does it affect households or does it affect firms? And then you draw the original demand and supply curve, and then you make your changes, you make your shifts, so that you see, did the real wage decrease or did it increase, right? So you'll first establish what it affects. Does it affect supply or demand? And then based on that, you're going to draw your shifted curve, and then you'll make conclusions based on that. But whatever happens, whether it's an increase or decrease, just know that a change in the supply of labor, a shift in the supply of labor, right, will cause a movement along the production function. Okay, so let us look at what happens if there's a change in demand. So whenever there's a shift in the demand curve, it will cause a swing in the production function. So whenever there's a shift in the demand curve, it will cause a swing. Okay, it's supposed to be starting at the same point. It will cause a swing in the demand, in the production function. So remember, with supply, it's movement along. With demand, it's a shift. Let me not say a shift, but a swing in the production function. So yeah, That is something to look out for. Same thing with demand. If they give you any scenario, you need to ask yourself, does it affect supply or does it affect demand? If it affects demand, you draw the original demand and supply curve, and then you make the necessary changes. If it shifted to the right, you draw a curve that shifts it to the right, and then you check, did the real wage increase or decrease? And did the equilibrium quantity increase or decrease? Right? So let us look at the potential reasons for shifts in the demand curve. So it could be changes in labor productivity. But what leads to labor productivity changes? First of all, it could be improved physical capital. Secondly, it could be human capital growth. Thirdly, it could be technological advancements, right? So whenever you have these three that lead to labor productivity, could potentially cause a shift in the demand curve. The second thing that could cause a shift in the demand curve is when you have expected profits from firms, right? If firms expect profits to increase, they are obviously going to want to get more labor so that they can produce more goods and services. So whatever scenario they give you, it might not be these ones, may be something else. Whatever scenario they give you, make sure that you ask yourself, does it affect demand or does it affect supply? And then you make the necessary changes and you conclude based on that. But in whatever scenario that they give you, a shift in the supply curve will cause a movement along the production function, whereas a shift in the demand curve on the other side will cause a swing, right, in the production function. So I hope that is clear. And then last thing for this video is that we are going to be covering our growth theories, right? So we have 4 growth theories. So I just summarized them based on what the notes were saying. So we have the first growth theory, which is the classical growth theory. So this is a view. So it is, it is the view that, it is the view that real GDP per person, so it is the view that real GDP per person is temporary, as population growth will eventually decrease it. So this view states that whenever there's a real GDP growth, right, it's eventually going to be decreased. And the main reason for this, based on this theory, is that there's going to be population growth. And when there's population growth, it means that your resources are going to be limited, because you're going to have a lot of people demanding one thing or a few things. So you have few resources that are demanded by a large pool of individuals. So that's the classical growth theory. It states that even though real GDP might increase, it will eventually be decreased by the population growth, because the more people there are in a country, it means that those people are going to have to share limited resources. So real GDP per person will eventually go down. If you think about it in the formula, remember, real GDP per person is real GDP over population. So the more your denominator is, the higher your population, the lesser your real GDP will be. So kind of makes sense. And then we go on to the second theory, and this is the modern day, I don't know how to spell that name, but it is the modern day theory, right? So in the modern day theory, it is the view that real GDP per person is temporary because of population, but not only population, it is also because of global warming and climate change. So in this theory, we see population growth as the problem. So the higher the population, it means that there's going to be global warming, there's going to be climate change, because the more people you have in a country, the more pollution you're going to have. Yeah, it's that theory that thinks that humans are disastrous to the weather, to the environment. I almost said to the weather, to the environment. So that's just that. So it is, let me repeat, it is a view that states that real GDP per person is temporary. Any growth in real GDP per person is temporary because of not only population growth, but because of global warming as well as climate change, right? And then we look at the third one, is neoclassical growth theory. So it is the view that if technological improvements stop, then real GDP per person is also going to decrease. So in this theory, you are saying that you have real GDP growth, real GDP per person growth, because there are technological improvements. So if the technological improvements had to stop, then your real GDP per person is going to stop. So we see real GDP per person growth being caused by technological improvements, right? So yeah, that's that. So for this theory, for the neoclassical growth theory, we see the effect that tech leads to growth, right? But we don't think that growth leads to technology. So we see technological improvements as by luck or by chance. However, we see growth being due to technological changes. I'll repeat because that's very important. You see technological changes being the reason why you have growth in the real GDP per person, but you do not see the growth in the real GDP per person being the reason why you have technological improvements. Hence, you think that technological improvements are happening by chance in an economy. So that's the neoclassical growth theory. And then the last theory says so the last theory is called the new growth theory. So it is the view that real GDP per person will continue to improve, it will continue to grow. Reason being that you will have technological improvements, however, also because people will always have the incentive to produce new technology, right? So meaning that technology, so it's an improved view of neoclassical growth theory. It is saying that yes, technological advancements do cause an increase in real GDP per person. However, unlike this one where we are saying it might stop, on this one it will never stop because people will always have the incentive to produce new technology. So yes, that is the end of the video. I hope that this video helped, especially on the growth theories, because we tend to overlook them, but they are examinable. So please make sure that you watch the video and you understand what I'm saying. So thank you so much for subscribing. That was chapter 24, economic growth. The last chapter, which is chapter 25, is finance, saving, and investment. So please be on the lookout for that. And in order to make sure that you do not fall behind with my videos, please make sure you click that subscribe button. Please make sure you share so that it helps somebody else. Don't be selfish. I mean, don't be selfish. Take everybody with you to the top. So thank you so much, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.